Contessina found him in the library where he was sketching from the illustrations in an ancient manuscript. She had been away for several weeks. Her face was ashen. He jumped up. "Contessina, have you been ill? Sit down here. I have something to tell you." She sank into the chair, leaned forward to the cold hearth as though to warm her hands. "The contracts have been drawn." "Contracts?" "For my marriage to Piero Ridolfi. I did not want you to hear of it from the palace gossip." After an instant, he asked brusquely, "Why should it affect me? Everyone knows that Medici daughters are given in political marriages. Maddalena to Francesco Cibo, the Pope's son. Lucrezia to Jacopo Salviati. I don't know why it should affect you, Michelangelo, any more than it should affect me." He met her eyes squarely for the first time. "And does it? How could it? Everyone knows that Medici daughters are given in political marriage." "Forgive me, Contessina. I was hurt." "It's all right." She smiled wistfully. "I know you by now." "And the marriage, when?" "Not for a while. I am too young. I asked for another year." "Yet everything has changed." "Not for us. We are still friends in the palace." After a silence, Michelangelo asked, "Piero Ridolfi, he will not make you unhappy. He is fond of you." Contessina looked up at him with her head bowed. "We do not discuss such matters. I will do what I must, but my feelings are my own." She rose. She went close to him. He hung his head like a dumb beast in a storm. When at last he looked up, he saw tears sparkling in her eyes. He reached out his hand tentatively, and slowly she placed her fingers into his until they were locked together quite hard. Then she withdrew, leaving behind only her faint mimosa scent and a hot dryness in his throat. There was no way to keep Savonarola's ringing voice out of his ears, for Leonardo's warning became a reality. In the midst of his second sermon against vice in Florence, Savonarola suddenly cried out against the Medici, blamed Lorenzo for the evil of the city, predicted the downfall of the ruling family, and, as a climax, the Pope and the Vatican. The Plato Academy assembled hastily in the studiolo. Michelangelo reported the first two sermons, then told of Leonardo's warning. Though Lorenzo had his monumental battles with the Vatican, at this moment he wanted to keep the peace with Pope Innocent VIII because of Giovanni, who had only a few months to wait before he was invested a full cardinal and would leave for Rome to represent the Medici. The Pope might well imagine that since Lorenzo had summoned Savonarola to Florence, and Savonarola was preaching in a Medici church, it was attacking the papacy with Lorenzo's knowledge and consent. It is a good thing he's attacking me at the same time," he murmured ruefully. "We simply have to shut him up," growled Poliziano. "We need only to put an end to his prophecies," said Lorenzo. "They are no part of our religion or of his office. Pico, that much you will have to undertake." The first defection came from the sculpture garden. Granacci reported that the fun-loving Baccio fell silent for hours on end, then took to disappearing for a day or two at a time. Then soon he began derogatory remarks about the Medici. Then he began extolling the virtues of Savonarola and the spiritual life of the cloister. One day he deserted to the Dominicans. Savonarola's sermons in San Marco were now attracting such large crowds that late in March, for the second Sunday in Lent, he transferred his activities to the cathedral. 10,000 Florentines stood packed together, yet dwarfed by the enormousness of space around them. In the few months that had passed since Michelangelo had heard him preach in San Marco, several changes had come over the friar. Because of his rigid fasting, the penance on his knees in the cells of San Marco, he could barely summon the strength to mount the pulpit stairs. He had assumed a complete identification of himself with Christ. As ye can see and hear, I do not speak with my own tongue, but that of God. I am his own on earth. I am his voice on earth. A cold shiver ran through the congregation. Savonarola was no less moved than his admirers. Michelangelo timed his arrival at the Duomo to meet his father and the rest of the family. Deserters from Santa Croce to hear the new prophet with the end of the service. He stood inside the door and gazed up at the Donatello and Luca della Robbia choir, stalls high on either side of the central altar, marble carvings of children at play, singing, dancing, laughing, serenading with musical instruments, pure Greek in their joyous love of life. In their testament to the beauty of their young bodies. For Michelangelo, the marbles cried out, "People are good," while Savonarola was thundering, "Humanity is evil." Who was right? Donatello and Della Robbia or Savonarola? The gloom of the church sat heavily round the Buonarroti dinner table. Lucrezia was in tears. That wicked man. He has ruined my beautiful white veil. From now on, Lodovico, if you wish to hear Savonarola preach, it must be after dinner and not before. Though the city was shaking in a religious upheaval, Michelangelo kept working calmly. Unlike Savonarola, he could not persuade himself that God was speaking through him, but he did not feel that if God saw, he would approve the work. He felt a grudging admiration for Savonarola. Was he not an idealist? As for his fanaticism, he had not Restici said, "You're like Savonarola, you fast because you can't bring yourself to stop work in the middle of the day." Michelangelo grimaced at the accusation, yet did he not feel a dedication to the task of revolutionizing marble sculpture, even as Phidias had taken death-worshipping Egyptian sculpture and rendered it Greek-human? Would he not have been willing to fast and pray until he barely had the strength to drag himself through the garden to his workshop, if that were necessary? And what was wrong with God speaking to his children? Surely he had the right, the power. He believed in God. If God could create the earth and man, could he not create a prophet or a sculptor? The Signoria invited Savonarola to address them in the great hall of the Palazzo della Signoria. Lorenzo, the Plato for the important Medici hierarchy throughout the city, announced its intention of going. Michelangelo took his place on a long bench between Contessina and Giovanni, facing the platform on which Savonarola stood before a wooden lectern with the city government banked behind. When Savonarola first mentioned Lorenzo de' Medici as a tyrant, Michelangelo saw Lorenzo's lips lift in a faint smile. He himself barely heard the words, for he was gazing about the great hall with its long side panels of pure white plaster, and thinking what magnificent frescoes could be painted there. Lorenzo's smile vanished as Savonarola mounted his attack. All the evil and all the good of the city depend from its head, and therefore great is his responsibility. If he followed the right path, the whole city would be sanctified. Tyrants are incorrigible because they are proud. They leave all in the hands of bad ministers. They hearken not unto the poor, and neither do they condemn the rich. They corrupt voters and aggravate the burdens of the people. Now Michelangelo began listening intently, for Savonarola charged that Lorenzo had confiscated the Florentine Dower Fund, monies paid into the city treasury by poorer families as guarantee that they would have the eventual dowry without which no Tuscan girl could hope to marry. That Lorenzo had used the money to buy sacrilegious manuscripts and evil works of art, to stage bacchanals through which he rendered the people of Florence prey to the devil. Lorenzo's dark skin turned green. Savonarola was not through. Lorenzo, the corrupt tyrant, must go. The dishonest Signoria sitting behind him must go. The judges, the officials must go. An entirely new government, ruled by a completely new and rigorous set of laws, must be installed to render Florence a city of God. Who was to govern Florence, revise its laws, and execute them? Savonarola. God had ordered it.